My first question is to senior journalist and commentator from Pakistan, Mona Alam. Mona, close to 70 dead in twin suicide attacks in Balochistan and in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. 700 dead since January. Clearly, Pakistan's reading of Taliban takeover of Afghanistan was flawed.
Thank you, Gaurav. Yes, I mean, there are no two ways about it. There were people like myself who had believed earlier that, if there were people within our political and military elites who ever believed that the idea of a strategic depth would benefit Pakistan at one point or the other, they were extremely flawed. And, time has proven how flawed they were. Because as a matter of fact, yes, there were people who were strong believers, and even, those from the past government, including our former foreign minister and including the former Prime Minister Imran Khan, they'd all been on record, or even, even the ones which were part of the PDM government. I mean, the former Defense Minister, Khwaja Asif, he happens to be someone who really knows the region well. And someone who has a good command and a good grasp of the subject. But I just fail to understand why people with such vast experiences have always advocated, the fact, have always advocated this flawed theory that once Taliban take over in Afghanistan, our issues with the TTP would be resolved automatically. And I think this was flawed in the first place. And yes, the Afghan government itself is making a mockery of the promises that it had made to Pakistan. It had promised that it would crack down against safe havens of the TTP and it would control the TTP, but none of that has happened. Or I must add that whatever that has happened is absolutely the other way around.
But why would Taliban take action against TTP when Taliban was being hunted? It's the TTP that actually rescued and gave shelter to Taliban. But let me take that to Mr. Tilak Deveshwar before I bring in Sushant Sareen. Pakistan Army and ISI nurtured the Taliban, created them to fight the Soviets, nurtured them post 9/11 for decades, and now Pakistan is blaming Taliban for attacking them. Sir, what was General Faiz Hamid doing at the Serena Hotel if the Taliban are killing the Pakistan Army and the security forces all along the AFPAC region, sir?
Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you for having me on your show. This is a mistake that every outsider has made while dealing with the Afghans and Afghanistan. They think that they can dominate them, can dictate to them. You can't do that. The British found it, the Soviets found out, the United States found out. And Pakistan is also finding out how they felt that having looked after the Taliban for 20 years and helped them to get back in Kabul, they will fulfill at least three of Pakistan's conditions. One was to throw India out of Kabul. Second was to recognize the Durand line. And third was to take care of the TTP. Now, the Taliban have done neither of the three, and they're not going to do any of the three either. Because simply, as far as the TTP is concerned, as you very rightly mentioned, when the Taliban needed help and shelter as sanctuary, it was the tribal people in the Fatah area, Waziristan especially, who gave them shelter. Today, if the TTP requires shelter, as for Pashtoon Valley, the Taliban is just bound to give them shelter. So they have told Pakistan categorically that we will not take action, but we can facilitate peace talks. And then it's up to you to work out a peace deal, a peace arrangement with you and your ulama, and you work it out. Don't ask us to take action against the TTP. Similarly with the Durand line. It's a line that divides brothers. We cannot accept that this is an unresolved issue. It's not a demarcated boundary.
Sir, I'll come to Durand line in just a moment, because I specifically want to talk about the Durand line, but in just a moment. But Sushant Sareen, Pakistan clearly did not get the strategic depth it was looking for when Taliban took over Kabul. It clearly was living in cuckoo land if it thought that action would be taken against TTP by Taliban. So that just shows Pakistan Army and ISI handling Taliban was completely flawed, Sushant Sareen.
Yes, it was, and it was, in a sense, it was done with eyes open because it was the worst kind of strategic myopia on the part of the Pakistanis. And, frankly, it makes me laugh every time I hear Pakistanis use the word strategic. It means they're going to make a big blunder going forward. as they did in this particular case. They should have understood that there is no difference. Yes, the shelter bit which Mr. Deveshwar is talking about is just one part of it. The fact of the matter remains that the TTP has been born from the womb of the Taliban. There is no difference between the TTP and the Taliban. The TTP is just the Pakistani phalanx of the Taliban. Nothing more, nothing less. The problem, however, has been that the Pakistanis thought that once they get the Taliban in place, then all their wet dreams about reaching Central Asia, about getting rid of TTP, everything will fall into place. Forget TTP. The Taliban have not even expelled the Baloch freedom fighters from who have taken refuge inside Afghanistan. So it's not just about the TTP anymore. It's even about the Baloch.
Yes.
Now, okay, then you come down, Gaurav, to this fact that all the promises which the Taliban have been making to the Pakistanis are as insincere as the Pakistanis made it to the Americans or the Pakistanis have made to us. We will not let our soil be used against you, right? Haven't we heard this so many times? Wasn't this told to the Americans so many times? But wasn't the Taliban bases based inside Pakistani territory? So this game is a game which two can play, and now the Taliban are playing this game, and the Pakistanis have no easy answer, because if they carry out offensive raids inside Afghanistan beyond a certain threshold, then they will be hell to pay. If they don't do anything, there is hell to pay. And don't just go after the big attacks, Gaurav. You know, very often people in the media look at only the big attacks. Look at the fine print of everyday attacks.
Yes.
It's a war of attrition of the kinds which is very difficult for a bankrupt state to sustain endlessly. Every day there are about 5, 6, 10 attacks in different parts, in different geographies. These are attacks where ambushes are taking place, sniper attacks are taking place, IEDs are going off, all kinds of things are happening. There are raids on encampments, all kinds of things are happening. So, you know, that pressure is building up. The Pakistanis really have no answer to it. And frankly speaking, I don't think anybody in India at least is going to shed any tear over Pakistan's predicament.
And Mona, you know, what was Pakistan thinking when Lieutenant General Faiz Hamid was there at the Serena Hotel and this was being celebrated by Pakistan, shackles of slavery overthrown, if I remember correctly. And Mona, didn't Sheikh Rashid, again, he was a federal minister that time, he said TTP will be housed near Islamabad with their families. So explain this mindset. It wasn't just a military mindset. It was perhaps overall mindset in Pakistan, whether civil or military, that you bring TTP close to Islamabad and there'll be peace. What were they thinking?
Well, yes, this is why I used the terminology people in military and political elite in Pakistan. This wasn't just the military mindset. I mean, there are a lot of sympathizers within our political system as well for the Taliban, and Maulana Fazlur Rahman and a lot of parties kind of thrive on this kind of a narrative. But having said that, I completely dispel this idea that Pakistan doesn't know what to do. I think Pakistan now really knows what to do, and for the first time in many years, I think Pakistan now realizes that whatever that it earlier believed and the kind of goodwill that they were trying to give to the Taliban, once they have a government and they successfully expel the Americans from their land, they would act differently. So I think Pakistan now completely realizes that the goodwill that they gave to Afghanistan all these years and harbored their refugees here in our country on our expense, that too for a cash-strapped country like Pakistan, it wasn't an easy thing to do. It wasn't a simple favor to give, but yet we did. And despite that, I mean, we're not being paid back or repaid back in the same manner. We expected the same goodwill gesture. Let's be very straight up about it. But unfortunately, that hasn't come across. And I think this realization has come in Pakistan after a long, long time.
No, but what are Pakistan's options? What are Pakistan's options, Mr. Deveshwar? Mr. Deveshwar, there are reports that seem to indicate that the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and the Baloch Liberation Army, they are coming together. Now, if that happens, is this Pakistan's worst nightmare coming true, that Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan will be on fire or is already on fire, sir?
Yes, absolutely. I think it will be a security nightmare because, they will be able to exchange the modern weaponry that the TTP has got, they will pass it on to the Baloch. I don't know which group it is. There are some mostly Baloch groups, but this is the kind of sharing that they will do. As I mentioned, I think in your last one of your programs, the TTP has now set up provinces, parallel shadow governments. And they have two provinces in Balochistan, one in the Pashtun area and one in Kalat and Makran. And they have two provinces in Punjab, North and South Punjab, one in Gilgit-Baltistan. So they are expanding. So if there is a lot of cooperation between some Baloch groups and the TTP, it's purely a tactical alliance because their ideologies are totally different. But this is the common enemy is the Pakistan army. And if they do cooperate, it will become that much more difficult for the Pakistan army to tackle them.
Sushant,
one of the things I just like to mention about what Mona said.
Yeah, kindly finish your point, sir.
I mean, I understand that Pakistan now knows what is to be done, but do they have the will to do it? Do they have the finances to do what is required to be done? Because the way the TTP has spread its tentacles, and the fact, the report that you mentioned, 700, Gaurav, I recall reading that report, over 1,000 casualties in the first 9 months of the year. That's almost 120 casualties per month. Can you imagine the number of people who are, and almost 40% of those are security forces. So already there is an uptick since compared to last year. So what is the Pakistan army doing about it? I mean, you read in the papers, the army seems to be more concerned about tackling these, this special investment facilitation council, SIFC. They're expanding the scope of the economic development. But that is not the army's first job. If somebody tells me they can do both, I don't think so. I think it will be very difficult for the army to focus on the economy, whereas they should actually be focusing on the security situation.
Sushant Sareen, Taliban has really turned around and said that their territory is not being used against Pakistan. Terrorists are in Pakistan itself. Not an answer that Pakistan expected, but what are Pakistan's options? Can Pakistan do a Zarb-e-Azb 2.0, or will that be catastrophic for Pakistan with TTP, as Mr. Deveshwar very rightly points out, spreading its tentacles across Pakistan, including in the Punjab province?
Gaurav, I think Mr. Deveshwar underestimates the world's #1 army, which can do everything. They can handle the economy, they can handle politics, they can handle security, they can handle diplomacy. So world #1 army and world #1 intelligence agency can do everything. But on a more serious note, look, I think the biggest problem in Pakistan, and this is where I strongly disagree with what Mona is saying, with all due respect. See, Mona says that we thought that the Taliban will reciprocate our goodwill. But I thought you were not showing any goodwill to the Taliban for the 20 years that the war on terror was being fought, because you always claimed that there was no Taliban in Pakistan, that you were fighting the Taliban. So the basic problem in Pakistan has been denial and this refusal to accept the reality for what it is, and this constant quest to chase ghosts. So for example, even today, when they know what is happening inside Afghanistan, they know the relationship between the Taliban and the TTP, they know the relationship between various groups, they will not say openly and clearly who is responsible. So what will they say after everything is said and done? But the Ra has come, right? The Ra is doing everything. Now, if you have this kind of a mindset where you are chasing ghosts all the time and you are not even ready to speak the truth about the problem which you face and where it's coming from, and it's also coming from inside Pakistan. You mean to tell me that I will give you at least 100 so-called strategic experts in Pakistan who even today insist that the policy that the Pakistanis followed with the Taliban over the last 20 years was the correct policy to follow, because that ways they ousted India from Afghanistan. Now, as Mr. Deveshwar said very correctly earlier, that those 3 aims which you had, one of which was to expel India, India is back in. What do you do now? Right? So this constant nonsensical kind of formulations which the Pakistanis come up with is precisely what distracts them from making a coherent policy. And until and unless they learn to speak the truth, which I don't think they will ever do, there is no way they're going to be able to fight it, because they are always looking for proxies on which to attach the blame and never the main people who are behind what is happening in this part of the world.
Mona, is that actually a fact? Because Pakistan Army now appears to be fighting on multiple fronts, from TTP to BLA to ISKP. It's fighting in Balochistan, it's fighting in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, it's also fighting, as many argue, in Gilgit-Baltistan and Sindh. So how will Pakistan tackle this problem on multiple fronts? Do you see a Zarbe-az 2.0?
I don't really think so, because there's no such chatter that I've heard of launching another operation, and that too on that level, that scale. I think for a first, we need to set our priorities correct. We need to have a clear-cut policies. The kind of double thoughts or the kind of different ideas that Mr. Sushant has pointed towards, I think that existed because of a coexistence of different schools of thoughts within the policymakers. Which is why, some people believe that we must have to have a strategic depth and we need to have some proxies, and the others believe that we do not need to shelter anyone.
No, but there are no different policymakers. There's just the Pakistan Army. There's just the GHQ. I mean, let's accept facts for what they are.
Within the army as well, there have been multiple schools of thoughts who have existed, and I would not deny that. But I think this is why I say, at least now I see that there's a clear-cut line. I do not see a very clear-cut line on a lot of political matters here in my country. But at least on this front of Afghanistan and Pakistan, I now know that, they're cracking down on multiple levels. They're also cracking down on the smuggling of dollars. They're cracking down, they're going hard on this Pakistan-Afghan transit trade, which happens to hurt the economic and the trade balance within our own country. So there are these multiple fronts which are being acted upon.
Is that kind of locking the stables after the horses have bolted? I'll ask you why. And I want to ask Mr. Deveshar this immediately. Sir, is there an apprehension that this wider Pashtunistan movement has already taken shape? The Afghans will never respect the Durand Line. And is this Pakistan's worst nightmare actually becoming true? The Durand Line will be the next conflict for Pakistan?
As I maintained, it's a very sensitive issue. And Pakistan has to tackle it very imaginatively and very sensitively, because there are many more Pashtuns in Pakistan than they are in Afghanistan. And you have, on the one hand, you have the TTP, which is adopted violence. You also have the PTM, the Pashtun Tahafuz movement, which is a non-violent constitutional movement. Unfortunately, the Pakistan Army is pushing the PTM to the wall, because they can't understand the civil rights movement, and they're pushing them to the wall. So, earlier, the PTP was talking about Sharia all over the country. Now they're talking about a nationalist element that they want their rule in erstwhile Fatah. They're adopting a much more nationalist Pashtun stance. And as I mentioned earlier, the Taliban, Afghan Taliban have not accepted the Durand Line, and neither do the TTP. So if Pakistan does not handle this imaginatively, it is going to be a very complicating factor for Pakistan, because the Pashtuns are not only in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. The largest Pashtun city in the world is Karachi.
Yes.
They're in the army, they're in transport networks, they're all over. So, I think Pakistan really has to go back to the drawing board and think very sensitively. They can't repeat what they did in East Pakistan.
But that would require, Sushant sir, in last closing 30 seconds that I have, that would actually require strategic thinking. Given Pakistan's history from 1947, they may be brilliant in tactical operations. Strategically, their army is a disaster. So is that the ticking time bomb in Pakistan, Pashtunistan or the Pashtun movement?
Yeah, I think Pashtunistan is only a manifestation of the bigger problem that Pakistan faces. I think the bigger problem Pakistan faces is a lack of clarity. Mona keeps saying that yes, they are now very clear. But look, if they were clear, then they would also dismantle. You cannot say that, okay, I will attack the Islamists who attack me on the western frontier, but I will nurture the Islamists who attack India on the eastern frontier. That I will preserve the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed, which are active in Kashmir and other parts of India. I will promote, as your report earlier said, Indian Mujahideen and all these other despicables who attack India. But then On the Western side, I will crack down on that. I'm sorry. It does not work like that. You cannot compartmentalize and put these guys in silos. Are you clear on the direction that the Pakistani state wants to take? I don't see that clarity. I see a lot of verbiage, which I've seen for the last 20 years.
Okay.
For the last 20 years, Gaurav, I have met multiple Pakistani journalists who assure me after every new army chief comes in that this man is true professional, as though all the others before him were some chaprasis. But this guy is a new professional who has come in, and this guy will now clean up everything. And the same guy does all the bongies which the other ones have done. This guy also does the same thing. So
okay.
I'm
since
sorry,
you've raised a point, let me quickly get Mona Alam to respond to that. Mona, do we see crackdown on terror of all hues, or do we continue to see this selective approach, which even for Pakistan now is counterproductive, madam?
Well, actually, eastern border and western border, they're completely different spheres. And I mean, talking about these individuals, these entities, they happen to be non-existent in Pakistan. They're already proscribed. They're under house arrest. You guys were, I think, propagating fake news of, I think, Hafiz Saeed's son who had passed away or abducted. I don't know
whatever you guys may mean, but the fact that terrorists exist on your soil, remains a fact, Mona. So, if even educated Pakistanis like you make this distinction between West and East, well, good luck to you. Good luck to Pakistan in dealing with these terrorists, with this Frankenstein's monster that's sadly consuming Pakistan itself. But Tilak Deveshar, Mona Alam and Sushant Sareen, as always, for joining me here on this discussion. Many thanks.